At this point, I am working on page 2 of the lecture notes. You'll find some numbered problems with which to practice with. So I'm going to start with problem number 1. It tells us to find the probability of a randomly selected value, and in that it is less than 1.43. And that's giving you your z-score. So I'm actually going to write z equals 1.43. So I can truly identify what that number is telling me. I'd like to find the probability of selecting that value under the curve, and that's going to actually identify the area under my curve as well. So the first thing I do is actually draw myself a picture. So on my curve, you'll see that my mean is 0. And if I move to the right, I get 1, and further 2, so 1.43 would fall somewhere about in between those two. My picture does not need to be perfect, but it's a good way to represent my information. So that is what we call the vertical bar. Now with our z-score table, our table is set up so that we are working with the shaded region that is less than or to the left of that vertical bar. So we're talking about all of this area. So this shaded region is the area or probability with which we are looking to identify. And you can see that as I shade this in further and further, it's really beginning to take shape that it's the majority of the area under my curve. It's only this small portion that's left unshaded. So I should expect to see a fairly high probability or an area that is close to 1. So now what I need to do is take this z-score and translate it within table A2. This is a positive number, so it is a positive z-score. So now I'm going to move to the right here. You'll notice over on the left-hand side you'll see the letters Z, some numbers going down. You'll also see numbers moving to the right. These are much smaller numbers. We need to use a combination of both the vertical and the horizontal columns and rows in order to identify our probability. So our z-score of 1.43, we're going to go down our column until we get to 1.4. Since we want 1.43, we have 0.03 here. So where that column and row meet is my probability, which is 0.9236. So going back to my sheet, I can now write that the probability equals 0.9236. That the area under my curve is approximately 0.9236. And that my probability could be written also as a percentage of about 92.36%. So that's our first example problem. Our second example problem, number 2, we're now changing our z-score. We want to find the probability of a randomly selected value is less than negative 0.38. So my z-score that I'm given is negative 0.38. Over at my curve, negative numbers are to the left of 0, but my negative number is not even 1, negative 1. So that value is somewhere between 0 and negative 1. I'm going to put it just shy of the midpoint, drawing my vertical bar. And since I'm still looking for less than, that means I'm looking to the left of my vertical bar. I'm going to shade all this region in. Now hopefully you can see by this picture that it is definitely less than half of the curve, which means it's less than 50%, which means it's less than 0.5 for probability as well as the area. So with that said, we now need to move to the left-hand side of our A2 table so that we can work with our negative z-scores. Now again, you'll see a picture up at the top identifying we have a vertical bar somewhere to the left of 0, and that we're looking for values that are less than. That's how this table is set up. So now moving over to the left, you'll see the z-scores. We want to go down to the bottom where we can find negative 0.3, and we want negative 0.38, so we'll move horizontally, and this will be our probability, 0.3520. So going back to my sheet, I can now write a probability of 0.3520. And that is my probability. That's what the question is asking. Now in my third example on this page, change things up a little bit. Find the probability of a randomly selected value is greater than. This is where you have to pay attention to your vocabulary. Greater than 1.43. And identify the region on the curve. So similar to what I did before, I'm going to come over here, find 1 and 2, and I know 1.43 is somewhere in between. But I don't want the values that are to the left of that vertical bar. Those would be less than. I want those that are greater than. So I want those that are to the right of the vertical bar. Well, since I've already identified this z-score of 1.43, I did that in problem 1. The area to the left, that probability was 0.9236. And I know my probability for the entire curve is 1.0. My area is 1.0. So if that's truly the case, then I should be able to take my entire area, my probability of 1, or my area of 1, and subtract this large portion that I don't want. That should leave me with this little sliver that's left over here to the right. And that's exactly what we'll be doing. 1 minus 0.9236 will give me the probability that I'm looking for. And in this case, when I subtract, I'll have a probability of 0.0764. And that's my answer for example problem number 3.